The second season of Megalo Box is phenomenal, and while that isn't something that should have pleasantly surprised me, it really did. Immediately after the announcement for this sequel, I was happy because I love Megalo Box, yet at the same time I was a bit puzzled as to where they were going to take a story that seemed to have ended pretty conclusively and in a great place. But that is why I am not a professional writer. In truth, Megalo Box Nomad applies the same general audiovisual direction and aesthetic style and adds a very different complexion to it to give us a side to the story that is extremely different, yet fits like a glove all the same to make it just as good and perhaps even better than the first season. And I think this all comes down to the very intentional shift that seems to be in reaction to the balls-to-the-wall style of the first. As I've said before, Season 1 is very much go, 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 a dance with the devil fueled by adrenaline and spearheaded by a main character who would rather not live at all if he isn't living on a knife's edge. And because the series ends without a gigantic breather at the end of Joe's adventure, we didn't have to worry about anything except the adrenaline and exhilaration of this awesome journey. But Season 2 has the audience take a step back and forcefully makes them look long and hard at the repercussions of Season 1, really taking its time to scrutinize all that occurred. Now, Episode 9 of Megalo Box Nomad hinges on a bedtime story told by Mac Rosario to his son entitled The Hummingbird and the Nomad. In it, the Nomad, who is dead set on ending his life due to his persistent misery, is interrupted by a hummingbird during his walk to death. The hummingbird pleads with him to listen to his song, to which he replies that he doesn't have the time for he's on a journey to die. The hummingbird then offers him a deal. If it can get the Nomad to tell a lie, the Nomad must hear it sing. The Nomad reluctantly agrees. The hummingbird then asks the Nomad why they are on a quest to die, and the Nomad replies that they have nothing to live for. The hummingbird then says that that is a lie because they have 2 eyes to see and 2 ears to hear it sing. The Nomad then sighs and admits to having lied. Interspersed with some beautiful segments of Joe and co fighting against a literal hurricane to keep the rebuilding of Team Nowhere's gym on track, what I get from this is that even after having lost everything, there is always something to live for, something to salvage. We have this theme tackled early on through the wonderful Chief's story, his journey of moving on and living in memory of his lost loved ones, how he found a way to honor them, help his people, and keep living in spite of the pain and loneliness. And likewise, in the painful contemplation of this season, after Nambu's death and with so many of the cast hurt, it's up to them to pick up the pieces and start over. They're alive, so they must live. And that's what Joe is doing. His journey through Season 1 is very much a journey to die, as described in the Hummingbird and the Nomad story, not caring about the consequences as long as he can dance with the devil and feel the exhilaration of life. And I don't think that either he or Yuri regrets that, but Joe definitely developed an avoidance to the realities of the pains of life once the dust settled, due in large part to that attitude. He burrowed his way through Season 1 fueled by adrenaline, but through this season, we and Joe are seeing that he took things for granted to an extent. A life not lived on the absolute edge of death isn't necessarily one that's wasted. Maybe it's just one that's appreciated and cherished in a different way. It's only after he's faced with the possibility of losing so much that he realizes the beauty of the mundane little moments. And initially he isn't equipped to handle that and runs away. But he's facing it now, because it's all he can do. As long as you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you have something to live for. Joe sees the beauty in the simplicity and mundanity of life, and he's doing his best to salvage what he has to live for while not expecting to be forgiven. Inspired by Chief, that's all he can do. And on the other hand, Mac feels the very same way and even sees glimpses of a hummingbird in the midst of his bouts, perhaps reaching out for the simple and beautiful life he cherishes, having already achieved his dream of having his son see him in the ring. But that dream gets further and further away, as he is being manipulated by Sakuma into thinking that he has no other choice but to keep pushing forward on this precarious path, one that he thankfully avoids by the end. The Hummingbird and the Nomad is essentially the primary thematic motif of the series by this point, and it's absolutely everywhere. And it is extremely thematically and symbolically important that Joe used Chief's gear in his final fight with Mac, not just as a way of passing on the torch of his dream and carrying on his spirit and legacy, but because that gear offered him protection and home and safety, representative of his new outlook. Gearless Joe was the classic underdog story, a story for the people to be inspired by. But much like Joe himself in the first season, Gearless Joe is much more of a symbol than a person. It is a concept to take comfort and confidence from, but it is no way for a person to live for too long. And so by donning Chief's gear, Joe is acknowledging this new outlook, learning from past mistakes and appreciating the here and now without sacrificing it. And when the time comes during his bout with Mac, Sachio throws in the towel to acknowledge that, with everyone wholly satisfied by the outcome and not needing to risk it all on a razor's edge with so much at stake and so much to appreciate. Megalo Box Nomad was amazing, a brilliant sequel in every way that expanded on and surpassed the original. From the first minute, it elevates the entire story and never stops doing so. It criticizes our characters' past actions, deals with so many important topics, champions the ephemeral nature of the present, and does all of it with elegance, tact, grace, and compassion. This is an answer to the story of the first season, and that answer is as profound as it is resonant. Many thanks for listening.